Hello friends, good afternoon. Am I audible and visible? Good afternoon, Nikita. Somebody please ping me so that I can begin with today's session. Good afternoon, Nivedita. Am I audible and visible, guys? Yes, somebody please ping me so that I can begin with the session. Good afternoon, NM. Paper and Pixel, good afternoon. Okay, thank you. So, guys, in today's session, we are going to understand about the administration of Delhi Sultanate. Okay, and here we are going to throw majorly light on what is Council of Ministers, what was the role of Sultan, what were the important portfolios, what was the taxation system at that time. So session won't be much longer. It's just a small session of 25 to 30 minutes. Okay, and from particularly tomorrow I'll be going through the MCQs of Delhi Sultanate. So please revise what we had studied previously, particularly concerning the slave dynasty, Khilji, Tughlaq, Sayyid and Lodi dynasty. Okay, so tomorrow we will be going through the MCQs, approximately 25 to 30 MCQs tomorrow. And from Monday onwards, I'll be starting with one of the most crucial chapters, that is the Mughal Empire. And I'll be starting with Babur. Okay, so yes, namaskar. Voice for Rights, Pargat ji, hi. So now we will begin with the administration of Delhi Sultanate. Hello everyone. Hi, this is Alok Ojha. Welcome to studyIQ IAS English. Okay. Now, if you have gone through the previous lectures of mine, particularly ancient India, okay, therein we had studied the administration of Mauryas. We had studied the administration during the Sangam age, particularly the Cholas, Cheras and the Pandyas. We had studied the administration of the Guptas. And one thing was common there, like the terminologies kept on changing, okay, but certain things were quite common. Similarly, you will also observe same thing here. I'll give you a small hint about the Mauryan administration and the Gupta administration. As a part of Mauryan Empire or Gupta Empire, particularly, Swami, Rajan or King, he was at the apex of the administration. And he was assisted in performance of his duties by Council of Ministers. These Council of Ministers were referred as Mantri Parishad. And Mantri Parishad was headed by one person referred as Pradhana Mantri or Mantri Parishad Adhyaksha. I am speaking about the Mauryan administration and the Gupta administration. In simple words, Pradhan Mantri or Mantri Parishad Adhyaksha, he acted as a channel of communication between the government or between the Sultan and the Council of Ministers, the personal advisors to the ministers. Same thing you will observe here as well. Hence, it is always said that history should be studied through comparative analysis. Okay? Now, let's begin with Sultan. Sultan, he was at the apex of the administration. And Sultan was assisted in performance of his duties by Council of Ministers, by his personal advisors. The first one to assume the title of Sultan was Mahmud of Ghazni. As we had seen about the early Muslim invader, the first one to come in India was Muhammad bin Qasim. As we had studied about the detailed history of Muhammad bin Qasim, why did he come to India? What was the role played by Dahir in bringing Muhammad bin Qasim to India? He was being succeeded by Mahmud of Ghazni, whose only purpose was to plunder India. He did not had any intention to establish permanent settlements in India. Then comes Muhammad Ghori, followed by many other rulers of Delhi Sultanate. in the form of slave dynasty, Khilji dynasty, Tughlaq, Sayyid and Lodi. So the first one who assumed the title of Sultan was particularly, yes, Mahmud of Ghazni. Now, as I have told you, at that time, Caliph also had a lots of power. Correct? Like Sultan, he was a political head of the realm. In the similar manner, the Caliph or the Khalifa, he was referred as the religious head. And the person who assumes the title of Sultan or the person who becomes the Sultan, it is believed that he assumes the title which is very close to Caliph. I'll give you a very simple example of this. Like this person, Balban, who is known for his policy of blood and iron. He assumed the title particularly Amir ul Momin. Simple words, Caliph's right hand man. On the other hand, one of the sons of Alauddin Khilji, he assumed the title Al-Wasik Billah, which simply means I am the Caliph. Forget about the right hand man of the Caliph. I am the Caliph. So Sultan, he was at the apex of the administration and he assumed a lot of power in that case. Okay? As discussed, Sultan was assisted in performance of his duties by Council of Ministers. And these Council of Ministers were referred by Majlis-e Khalwat. Very important to note the terminologies. As I have told you previously, UPSC usually has a tendency concerning ancient and medieval India, particularly by asking the terminologies. Very soon I'll be coming up with a video on strategy for what we say history. So in that I have explained basically what needs to be focused on ancient, medieval and modern majorly. So here, Majlis-e Khalwat was Council of Ministers and they used to aid and advise the Sultan in performance of his duties. Now, Majlis-e Khalwat was being headed by a person referred as Naib. Naib basically means the Prime Minister who was very close to the Sultan. I'll give you one small example about this. If you remember the slave dynasty, guys, correct? If you remember the slave dynasty, in slave dynasty, we had seen one important concept. We had seen about Balban. Why Balban was considered as one of the most successful rulers of slave dynasty? There was a reason behind that. It was not just his policy of blood and iron. It was because he was one of the most experienced Sultan, because before becoming the Sultan, he had seen the reign of approximately 5 to 7 major Sultans at that time. And in fact, there was one person whose name was Nasiruddin Mahmud, one of the rulers of slave dynasty. Balban was acting as a naib for that person. So what is naib? He was acting as a prime minister for that person. So Nasiruddin Mahmud, he was the Sultan. He was assisted by Majlis-e Khalwat, that is Council of Ministers. And this Majlis-e Khalwat was being headed by a person referred as Balban. He was holding the position of a naib, that is a prime minister. Very simple words. Naib was acting as a channel of communication between Sultan on one side and the Council of Ministers, or particularly the Majlis-e Khalwat on the other side. Okay? Now there were different departments. I'll again co-link with the Mauryan Empire. If you remember the Mauryan Empire, we had studied about Kautilya's Arthashastra in quite detail. I've told you that Kautilya's Arthashastra is not only just a book on economics, it's a book on political statecraft. Many historians believe that it's a first book on geopolitics. It has been translated into German language by Jacobin. It has 6,000 shlokas, 15 books or 15 adhikarnas. And in that it has been mentioned that totally Arthashastra mentions that there are 33 to 34 departments. And the head of these departments were referred as Amatya. So who used to appoint these Amatya or ministers or these officers? The king. Who advised the king? Mantri Parishad. Similarly here as well. Sultan was at the apex of the administration. He was assisted by Council of Ministers referred as Majlis-e Khalwat. Now, Majlis-e Khalwat was headed by a person referred as Naib or Prime Minister. Okay? Now, Naib and the Sultan, they will decide who will hold which portfolio, who will become the Minister of Defense or War, who will become the Minister of Agriculture. So this was being decided by Naib and majorly the Sultan. And the major discretionary power lies in the hands of Sultan. As I've told you, Sultan stands at the apex of the administration. Got it? Now let's move ahead. Central administration, if we see, as I've told you, Sultan was assisted in performance of his duties by different ministers. Now, what are the important department? Let's understand. First department that we'll go through is Diwan-e-Arz department, and one is Diwan-e-Wazirat department. As I've told you, when Balban came to throne, okay, now Balban realized one thing. Listen to me carefully. That these 40 powerful nobles played a very major role either in making the Sultan or breaking the Sultan. And that system was Turkan-e-Chahalgani system or Chahalgani system initiated by Shamsuddin Iltutmish. Apart from this, Balban had to face a lot of rebels or internal strife. Apart from this, Mongols were eyeing the throne of Delhi's Sultanate. And at this particular point of time, Balban realized one thing. I need to create a separate military department. And I need to separate the finance and military department. So Balban created two departments. Diwan-e-Wazirat departments, whose major responsibility at that time was finance. And the other one was Diwan-e-Arz department or defense department or military department headed by Arz-e-Mumalik. Terminologies are important. So at any cost, you have to remember these terminologies because time and again, UPSC has a tendency to ask questions on these terminologies. Okay? Then comes Diwan-e-Insha department, Department of Correspondence. Diwan-e-Rasalat department, it is a department of appeals and religious affairs. Then Diwan-e-Mushtaq Raj department, it is nothing but corruption department. I'll give you a very small example about this. We had studied about one of the most important rulers of Delhi Sultanate, particularly Khilji dynasty. And to be very precise about Alauddin Khilji. Alauddin Khilji was not only known for his expeditions that he led. Alauddin Khilji was also known for the market reforms that he brought. So what did Alauddin Khilji do? He appointed a market superintendent who was referred as Shahana-e-Mandi. And to regulate the market, he fixed the prices of every commodity. Why? And we had studied that because Alauddin Khilji had to maintain a huge army. And in that case, he completely disallowed stock hoarding. Why? Because if there is a stock hoarding, the prices of the commodities might rise. And in that case, it would become impossible for Alauddin Khilji to sustain such a huge army. What was the strength of the army of Alauddin Khilji? I'll give you a small example. He just had 4,75,000 cavalrymen. I'm not speaking about the entire army. Just 4,75,000 cavalrymen. And to maintain such a huge army, he required resources, commodities. Hence, stock hoarding was not allowed. But what could happen in that case? The wealthy merchants, the rich traders, they can bribe Shahana-e-Mandi. So for that, Alauddin Khilji had organized a spy department in the form of Barid and Munihan. If you remember the terminologies. So that was the intelligence wing, that was the spies of Alauddin Khilji. And particularly their major role here was to check any corrupt practices within the kingdom. So Alauddin Khilji created Diwan-e-Mushtaq Raj department particularly to check the corruption. While back we have seen Diwan-e-Rasalat department, it was an appeals department. Then Diwan-e-Bandagan department, slave department. Ishtiyaq, Diwan-e-Khairat, all these are departments created by whom? Firoz Shah Tughlaq. If you remember Firoz Shah Tughlaq, I've told you about the Tughlaq dynasty that Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq, referred as Ghazi Malik, he was the founder of Tughlaq dynasty. He was being succeeded by his son, whose name was Muhammad bin Tughlaq, also referred as Fakhruddin Malik Juna Khan. And historians also refer him a wise fool. But on the other hand, Firoz Shah Tughlaq was referred by different historians as a reformer. Why he was referred as a reformer? Because of the different steps that he has taken for the administration. I'll give you a small example about this. Like, why do nobles, why do courtiers, they fall into corrupt practices? Because of lack of money. So at that time, what did Firoz Shah Tughlaq did? He increased the salary of nobles so that they won't fall into corrupt practices. Apart from this, Firoz Shah Tughlaq, what step did he take? Even after the retirement, they were being given the pensions so that they won't fall into any sorts of corrupt practices. And he created a pension department which was referred as particularly Diwan-e-Ishtiyaq, that is pension department. Apart from this, he was also involved in various philanthropic activities, charitable activities. And for these charitable activities, Firoz Shah Tughlaq had created a separate department in the form of Diwan-e-Khairat. Khairat means charity. Then, he had more than 180,000 slaves who were employed in different karkhanas. And there was a separate department of slave created by Firoz Shah Tughlaq, which is referred as Diwan-e-Bandgan department. So remember, Diwan-e-Khairat, Firoz Shah Tughlaq, charity department. Diwan-e-Bandgan, again Firoz Shah Tughlaq, slaves department. Diwan-e-Ishtiyaq, Firoz Shah Tughlaq, pensions department. One more thing, like it is a part of revision right now. So please remember about Firoz Shah Tughlaq. As I've told you, Firoz Shah Tughlaq, he did a lot of work for the peasants at that time. And as per the contemporary historian Farishta, he had constructed more than 845 canals across India. And there was a Persian word for canals, and this Persian word was referred as Rajwah. And the basic purpose of canals was irrigation. He also took steps for horticultural and floricultural practices. More than 1,200 gardens were being constructed around Delhi by Firoz Shah Tughlaq. Apart from this, Firoz Shah Tughlaq had introduced irrigation tax. He had introduced irrigation cess. And that irrigation tax or irrigation cess was referred as Haq-e-Sharb. We have already studied all these aspects. I'm just brushing up the concepts again. Okay? Now moving on with the Diwan-e-Kohi department. Diwan-e-Kohi department is Department of Agriculture. And the credit for creation of this department goes to one of the wise fools of Delhi Sultanate, that is Muhammad bin Tughlaq. As I have told you, Muhammad bin Tughlaq, he increased the taxes in the region of Doab. Okay? Why? Already we have studied about the 5 major experiments of Muhammad bin Tughlaq. Transfer of capital from Delhi to Daulatabad and retransfer of capital. Khorasan expedition. Introduction of token currency, Karachi expedition, and then finally comes taxation in the Doab. Now, unfortunately, when he heavily taxed the people of the region of Doab, the peasants of the Doab, at that time the region of Doab was hit by famine. So in that case, what happened? Muhammad bin Tughlaq invested 70 lakh tankas for replenishment of the soil. And he started a separate department called as Diwan-e-Kohi department or Department of Agriculture. So these are the different departments that were being created under Majlis-e-Khalwat, the important ones. Okay? I'll repeat the points again. Pay attention carefully. Yes, I can understand the session is full of terminologies, but terminologies are important from the exam perspective. Okay? Now, first thing we need to remember, apex of the administration, we have Sultan. Sultan is assisted in performance of his duties by Council of Ministers referred as Majlis-e-Khalwat. Majlis-e Khalwat was headed by Prime Minister, referred as Naib. There were different departments such as Diwan-e Wazirat, Diwan-e Arz, Diwan-e Rasalat, Diwan-e Insha, Diwan-e Kohi, Diwan-e Bandagan, Diwan-e Ishtiyaq. And we have seen in quite depth and detail what was the role of these departments under various sultans. Clear? This was majorly about the central administration. Similarly comes the provincial administration. So let's understand the administration at the grassroots level in a systematic format. Now I will go for comparative analysis of Mauryan and Guptas again. As I have told you, whenever you study things, just go for comparative analysis. I'll tell you one important aspect. Okay, you won't believe this. Even today, the sarpanch or the head of the villages, particularly in the northern part of India, is referred as Chaudhary. Isn't that so? During the Mughal period, I'll give you an example. There was a village accountant referred as Patwari. Have you heard about this? Even today, the post of Patwari is there. During the medieval period, particularly during the period of Mughals, there was one more post, particularly referred as Kanungo. It is prevalent even today. If we study about the Marathas administration, we will study about the role of Patil. He was a village headman, and Patil is one of the major surnames right now in the region of Maharashtra. Deshmukh, Deshpande, all these were officers during the Maratha period. Correct? And prevalent even today. Similarly, I'll go for a comparative analysis of Mauryan period. I'll give you a small example so that you can easily correlate the things. During Mauryan period, the entire, region was divided into 5 provinces. Central, Northern, Southern, Eastern, Western. Central province had a capital at Patliputra. And there were other 4 provinces. So who used to sit in the central province? The Rajan or the Swami used to sit in the central province. And the rest of the 4 provinces were being governed by Kumar Amatya or Aryaputra. Who are these? These are nothing but provincial governors. Similarly, here the administration of Delhi Sultanate was further divided into different provinces. And these provinces were referred as Ikta. Correct? These provinces were referred as Ikta. If you remember the Ikta system, we had studied that system in quite depth and detail. Again, I'll go for a quick revision of that. First thing, Ikta system was being initiated by Shamsuddin Iltutmish. And as a part of this system, rather than giving the salary to the noblemen, a piece of land was given to them. Whatever taxes was accrued from that land, it was kept as a salary, and the excess amount was sent back to the administration. And that excess amount was referred as Fawazil. So that is Ikta. Ikta basically means piece of land. The piece of land may be smaller or maybe the entire bigger region. So the bigger region was referred as provinces. So Ikta was province. Who is going to head the province? The provincial governors. And the provincial governors were referred as Mukti or Wali. Okay? Now further, the Iktas were further divided into districts. These districts were referred as Shik. And Shik was headed by Shikdar. Please remember the hierarchy. Sultan at the top. To assist him, central administration. Division into provinces. Provinces were referred as Ikta, headed by Mukti, Wali or Iktadar. Further divided into district, referred as Shik, headed by Shikdar. Then comes sub-district or Taluka or Tehsil, headed by Amil. And finally village, that is Gram, headed by Mukaddam or Chaudhary. Gram was also referred as Mauza. Okay, I'll repeat the points again. Pay attention carefully. I can understand today's session is full of terminologies, full of factual knowledge. Okay, but you have to remember them, guys, because time and again UPSC might ask questions on these terminologies. Okay, pay attention carefully. I'll repeat the points again. Sultan at the top. Sultan was assisted in performance of his duties by Council of Ministers, Majlis-e-Khalwat, different departments, further divided into different provinces. Provinces were referred as Ikta, headed by Iktadar, Mukti or Wali. I'll suggest you have a pen and paper along with you so that you can note down the important points. So Ikta headed by Mukti or Wali or Iktadar. Further divided into districts. Districts were referred as Shik, headed by Shikdar. Further divided into Taluka, Tehsil or towns headed by Amil. And the Taluka, Tehsil or town was referred as Pargana. Finally comes Gram or Mauza, village, and headed by Mukaddam or Chaudhary. Hope you understood till here. Okay? Any question? Any doubt? Yes, guys? Any question? Any doubt? Now let's understand about the classification of the land, particularly during the period of Delhi Sultanate. Now, land was majorly categorized or classified into three categories. First was Ikta. Second was Khalis. And the rest was Inam. Time and again, I have told you about Ikta system. Ikta system was introduced by slave dynasty ruler Shamsuddin Iltutmish, who was slave as well as son-in-law of Qutbuddin Aybak. Ikta system during the time of Iltutmish was not hereditary. The head of that Ikta was referred as Iktadar, Mukti or Wali. Okay? Now, as I've told you, he used to keep his salary, excess amount was returned back to the administration. And the excess amount was referred as Fawazil. Okay? Now comes the time of Firoz Shah Tughlaq. Firoz Shah Tughlaq made the Ikta system hereditary. Simple words, suppose if I am a Iktadar of a particular place and after my, who will succeed after me? Somebody who belongs to my family, somebody who belongs to my lineage would become the next Iktadar. So, although it was started by Iltutmish but was not hereditary, Ikta system became hereditary from the time of Firoz Shah Tughlaq. Now comes the Khalis land. Now what is Khalis land? It was the personal property of the ruler. Okay? Now I'll tell you one practice. And what is that practice? Whenever an attack was done on a particular place by a particular sultan, so he used to loot a lot of money from there. That money was referred as khum. But apart from money, different territories was also undertaken. Correct? It was also being occupied as a part of policy of imperialism or expansionism. So there were certain part of the property that went into the personal property of the sultan. And that the money that has been occupied, the taxes that we get from that land, okay, that is used for the royal household. In simple word, Khalis land is nothing but it is required for maintenance of royal household. Simple words, personal property of the emperor, the sultan. Okay? Yes, Rishi, good afternoon. No issues, don't worry, you can continue now. Then comes Inam land. Okay. Now, the rulers were also involved in various charitable activities. Like I'll give you a small example, Qutbuddin Aybak. Qutbuddin Aybak is also referred by different historians as Lakh Baksh. Why? He used to go for liberal donations. He used to donate a lot. So sometimes what happened? He used to donate the land for construction of what? Masjid or Dargah. Now what is the difference between Masjid and a Dargah? In Masjid particularly, it is believed that Allah is worshipped. But what is Dargah? Dargah, it's a tomb of a Sufi saint. Okay? So, like I'll explain you the entire process when we will study about the Sufism and its different practices. Okay? So, like you might have heard about the Dargah of Sheikh Muinuddin Chishti ji, also referred as Ajmer Sharif. You might have heard about the Dargah of Nizamuddin Aulia, also referred as Mehboob-e-Illahi, beloved of Allah. So particularly for construction of these dargahs and masjid, what happens? These sultans used to give or donate the land, and such land were referred as inam land. Getting the points clear? So particularly there were three kind of lands. The first one being, as we had discussed, the first one was Ikta land, Khalis land, which was actually the personal property of the ruler and it was required for maintenance of the royal household. Then comes Inam land, a land that was being gifted. Okay, moving ahead. Types of taxes. See, when we will study Ushra and Kharaj, you will understand one important concept at that time, that at that time there was a lot of discrimination, particularly on the basis of religion. How do we come to know about this? I'll give you a small example. Ushra, it was a tax that was imposed on Muslims. Okay? And what kind of tax was it? A very small example. Suppose if I'm a Muslim peasant, a Muslim farmer, a Muslim cultivator. Annually, I have to give some sort of taxes to the Sultan or the administration. Okay. Now, I have, example, 10 bighas of land. And in 10 bighas of land, I cultivate approximately 50 quintals of wheat. Now, minimum 5%, maximum 10%. Okay, 5 to 10%. I have to give either in the form of cash or kind to the administration. Correct? In simple words, 5% of 50 quintals. It is approximately around 2.5 quintals. 10% is approximately around 5 quintals. So 5 or 10% of my produce I had to give to the administration. That was only for the Muslim peasants, and that is called as Ushra. On the other hand comes the system of Kharaj. This was particularly for the non-Muslim peasants, and it ranged from 1/3 to 2/3, approximately 33% to 66%. And this was the taxes imposed particularly on the non-Muslims. Can you imagine? See the taxes, like what is 1/3 of 50 quintals? Can you imagine? It is approximately around 16 quintals. I am giving an examples. Suppose I am a Muslim peasant, I have cultivated 50 quintals of rice or wheat. I have to give 2.5 or 5 quintals as a tax, either in the form of cash or in the form of kind. On the other hand, particularly if I am a non-Muslim peasant, in that case, minimum tax was 1/3, maximum tax was 2/3. So averagely, I had to pay 16 quintals in the form of tax, either in the form of cash or kind again. Then comes kham or khum. Now, what is kham or khum? Now, this concept, let's understand about this. There's a concept called as Bali and Bhaga, particularly in ancient India. Now, whenever the rulers used to follow the policy of expansionism or imperialism, certain booty was looted. Okay? And whatever amount was being looted, some part of the amount went into the personal treasury of the ruler, and maximum part was used as a part of the administration. Same thing was followed here. Now, this is called as kham or khum. I'll give you a small example. Mahmud of Ghazni, he led many expeditions into India. He led expeditions particularly in the northern part of India. The major expedition that he led was particularly in the region of Gujarat, where he raided the famous Somnath temple dedicated to Lord Mahadev, and he plundered tons of gold there. So whatever money or gold that was being plundered, 20% minimum, that is 1/5, it would go into the personal expenses of the ruler. And that was called as kham or khum. Okay? And 80%, 4/5 would be utilized for the purpose of administration. But during the time of Alauddin Khilji, it was completely reversed. completely reversed. What was that? During time of Alauddin Khilji, whatever was being occupied in the form of loot, 4/5, 80% used to go into the personal treasury of Alauddin Khilji. 80%. And rest 20% was utilized for the what we say administrative purposes. So, come or hum in simple word is nothing but the booty that has been looted in the war, the money that has been plundered in the war, and averagely it was 20%. Okay, 20% went to the personal treasury of the Sultan. But in Alauddin Khilji's case, it was opposite. Then comes zakat. Now, zakat is considered as one among the 5 fundamental principles of Islam. Like I'll tell you few fundamental principles of Islam. First one is La ilaha illallah and Muhammadur Rasul. In simple words, Allah is one and his messenger is who? Muhammad. Okay. Second thing, the second major principle of Islam is offering prayer to Allah at least 5 times in a day. And this is referred as namaz. There are different kinds of namaz. Zuhar ki namaz, Fajr ki namaz, Asr ki namaz, Maghrib ki namaz, Isha ki namaz. So it depends upon the timing of the day. Third major principle of particularly Islam is observing Roza. That is rigorous fasting in the holy month of Ramzan. Fourth major principle particularly is zakat. And what is zakat? It is nothing but charity. Okay? Like for example, it is believed that during times of different sultan, zakat was being imposed on Muslims. And it was approximately minimum 2.5%, 2.5%. Very simple words. Suppose if I have earned rupees 100, out of rupees 100, I have to give 2.5 rupees at least as a tax. Okay? I can give excess amount as well, depending upon the will that I have. But minimum, I had to pay 2.5 rupees as a zakat tax. Okay? And that was particularly utilized for the underprivileged section of the society. Like I gave you a simple example about Firoz Shah Tughlaq. Firoz Shah Tughlaq had created a department which is called as Diwan-e-Khairat department, charity department. Where will the money in the charity department come from? The tax of zakat. He had started free hospital service referred as Dar-ul-Shifa or Shifa Khana. Where will the money come from? Zakat tax. So zakat, the money that was being raised, it was personally utilized for the underprivileged section of the society at that time. Okay? Then, jizya. This tax have been imposed on non-Muslims. And it was basically into 3 categories. 12 dirham, 24 dirham and 48 dirham. Women, children, beggars, handicapped, unemployed, they were exempted from payment of zakat. Okay. Now, not zakat, jizya. What is jizya? It's a religious tax. Now, let me explain you what is this tax all about. Suppose I'm a Brahmin. Now, I am a Hindu. Now, I have to construct a temple at a particular place. Now, that land belongs to me. Okay? So, in that case, if that land belongs to me, I need not pay a single penny as a tax for construction of a temple. Why? Because land is mine. Money that is required for construction of temple, I am paying that. But in that case, I have to pay the tax to the Sultan for construction of a temple. That was referred as jizya. Or for that sake, as I have told you, one of the major principles of Islam is also like going to Hajj. Okay? And the person who has completed his Hajj Yatra is also referred as Mustati. In very simple words, like it is a responsibility of every Muslim to go for a Hajj pilgrimage at least once in a lifetime. At least once. Okay? So he has to go through the process of Hajj. Similarly, in Hinduism, we have one system. We go for Char Dham Yatra. where we also cover particularly the 12 Jyotirlings. Okay, we also go to different places like Prayagraj and Kashi. So in that case, that was a pilgrim tax that needs to be paid, and that was in the form of jizya. Okay. Now I'll give you a small example. As I've told you, although Firoz Shah Tughlaq, he had done a lot of work, particularly for whom? Particularly for the people, but still he was a bigot. He was a fundamentalistic follower of Islam. As I've told you, once upon a time, one Brahmin questioned the ayats of the Quran. And for questioning the ayats of the Quran, that Brahmin, he was being punished. Rather than saying punished, he was openly burnt alive. So to an extent, like this tax was particularly imposed on Hindus or non-Muslims. One thing. I'll give you a small example. Even during the Mughal period, what happened? Taxes were being imposed by the Mughal rulers, particularly jizya. But Akbar had abolished jizya. Shah Jahan, who is also referred as Little Akbar because of his policies. Okay, I'll give a small example. Like Banaras, Varanasi or Kashi, it is one of the most famous pilgrim places, particularly concerning the Hindus. So in Banaras, there was a Brahmin whose name was Kavindracharya. And that Brahmin Kavindracharya, during the Mughal period, he goes to Shah Jahan and requests him to ban jizya in the region of Banaras because many pilgrims visit the place of Banaras or Kashi. So historians believe that the Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan banned jizya on the insistence of Kavindracharya in the region of Banaras. So jizya is nothing but religious tax or the pilgrim tax that was being imposed on non-Muslims, particularly the Hindus. Okay. Now comes the last major point, Batai system. Now what is Batai system all about? There are three types of Batai: Khet Batai, Lank Batai and Ras Batai. Now I'll tell you the major aspect of these things. Batai basically means what? Distribution. So like it's a Hindi word. And what is a Hindi word? Baantna. Baantna means to distribute. Okay. So this was also one of the form of taxes. As I've told you, taxes can either be paid in cash or in kind. So if the crops were being, the form of a taxes. So what kind of taxes were being imposed in the form of crops? Let's understand. Khet Batai. Then comes Lank Batai. And finally comes Ras Batai. Now what is the difference between Khet Batai, Lank Batai and Ras Batai? Now pay attention carefully. Suppose this is my agricultural field. Okay. And this agricultural field comprises approximately of 10 acres or 10 bigha. Now what will happen? Now the crop is standing. Okay. The seeds have been sown. Okay. The crops have been cultivated. But the crops have not been harvested. So just by looking at the agricultural field, what will happen? The crops would be distributed, and that is called as Khet Batai. Example, if 10 acres of land is there and I have to pay 5 acres as a tax. So suppose this is 5 acre, this is 5 acre, and the crops are cultivated on both the sides. So half of the side I have to give as a tax, and that is called as Khet Batai. Now this is just on the basis of standing crop. The field has not been harvested as of yet. That is Khet Batai. Okay. Now comes the question of Lank Batai. What is Lank Batai? Crops are being harvested, but the grain is not separated from the chaff. On that basis, it would be distributed. You might have seen in the rural areas. What happens in that case? During the harvesting season of wheat, what happens? The wheat bundles are kept in the field after cutting them, after harvesting them. So the distribution of these bundle, in simple word, was referred as Lank Batai. I have just given you an example for easier understanding of the concept. Okay. So this is called as Lank Batai. Khet Batai means distribution of the crop, particularly the standing crop, not harvested. After harvest, after cutting the crop, Lank Batai. And finally, after separating the grains from the chaff, that is called as ras batai. In simple words, here direct grains were being given. So that is the major difference between khet batai, lank batai and ras batai. Okay, so this was the distribution system that was being followed at that time. Now, particularly as I have told you, Muhammad bin Tughlaq had taken different steps for the increasing the cultivation process. Like as I've told you, he started a department which is called as Diwan-e-Kohi department, which was nothing but agriculture department. He started giving takawi loans to the peasants, wherein the interest rates were very minimum, so that they could replenish the fertility of their soil. In the coming years, Firoz Shah Tughlaq was particularly known for what? Firoz Shah Tughlaq was particularly known for irrigation cess, irrigation tax. Apart from this, he constructed many canals for the purpose of irrigation. And these canals, there was a Persian word referred as Rajwah. Okay, so these were the different systems that came up during the time of Delhi Sultanate. Trade during that time was also vibrant. There would be a separate chapter wherein I will be discussing about the trade system at that time. Apart from this, I will be also discussing about the apart from the trade system, the important constructions that were being laid down, the literature, and that would be majorly I'll try to cover as a part of art and culture. So this was about the basic administration of Delhi Sultanate. Did you understand the concepts? Did you understand the terminologies? Right in the start itself, I've told you, please focus on the terminology, since UPSC has a tendency to ask questions on terminologies. Okay? So hope you understood things, guys. So the resolution batch, particularly here, I'll be speaking majorly on the long-term batch. Guys, the long-term batch has already begun. And in that case, as a part of long-term batch, I'll tell you one of the most important feature. And that feature is, right from the basics, you would be taught different things. Okay? The batch is completely in English language, which will particularly help out the aspirants from the South India and northeastern part of India. Answer writing plays a very crucial role in the UPSC examination. And different aspects of answer writing would be covered. I have already covered the basic part of the ancient India, and tomorrow I would be concluding with ancient India as a part of long-term batch. Again, that batch would be revived very soon. Okay. Apart from this, the target year for 2027 resolution batch, where you can use my code Alok Live. The prices are 34,999. Apart from this, the target year 2028, again a very separate batch for English medium. 49,999 is the price. You can use the code that is flashing on your screen. Apart from this, if you want a special counseling, you can contact on the number that is flashing on your screen along with the code Alok Live. Okay, guys? So hope you understood the basic administration. Probably tomorrow I'll be coming up with the MCQs. Okay? Yes, Nivedita, you have a question. Explain the Batai system again. Simple words, there are three kinds of Batai system or distribution system. First system is wherein we directly distribute on the basis of the standing crop. The crops have not been cut, they have not been harvested. The second one is Lank Batai, where the crop is harvested, okay, but the grains are not separated from that crop. And that finally comes Ras Batai, wherein what happens? Particularly the grain is separated from that crop, and that is called as Ras Batai. So these are the distribution system at that time. Hope Nivedita have answered your question. Okay. So guys, long-term batch, those who are aspiring for 2 years later, the preparation plays a very crucial role. See, like the journey is very important in comparison to the destination that you're going through. Okay. Like when you go for the long-term batch, you'll come to know about one thing, that there are many things that we are lacking in. Like today I'll be coming up with, very soon with a video on strategy for history. Like many aspirants have a confusion, sir, should we go for Spectrum? Because Spectrum is such a huge book, sir. Shall we read Bipan Chandra or should we read Plassey to Partition of Shekhar Bandopadhyay? Why should we read B.L. Grover and Alka Mehta? So why, like the number of questions in UPSC prelims examination, sir, is there any decreasing trend concerning history? So I'll be answering these questions, particularly in the strategy today. So one thing needs to be remembered, my friend. Your preparation, it is not only your destination, it's your journey. And here you have to overcome the lacunas that you are facing. You might have a good retaining power, but probably you don't have the, what we say, answer writing skills. So here you need to improve the answer writing skills. You might have a lot of knowledge, you might have a lot of analytical ideas, but you cannot pen them down. So that becomes a hurdle or an obstacle, particularly while solving the case studies of ethics and writing good essays. So in the long-term batch, it will play a very crucial role in helping you out. And particularly if you use the code Alok Live, I would be guiding you through the different aspects. Okay guys, so with this, I'll stop my words for the day. See you guys tomorrow. Thank you and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.